Hey everybody, welcome to Grip and Contemplate. I'm Chris,
I'm Brittany.
and this is a real place for real people to have real conversations.
We are here to experience real thoughts and feelings, but just be warned, there may be some oversharing.
Yes, and this episode, maybe even more than next, but the next few episodes, I think we're going to really get some overshare.
Yes.
Really get some oversharing in there. So today, Britt, why did you want to name this episode Grit?
Well, I feel like it takes Britt to do what we do when it comes to lifting. I mean, in
Yeah.
any case, really,
In
in
any-
anyone's case in lifting, but
Yeah.
or resistance training, or really any style training.
Yeah.
But that's the first thing that came to mind.
No, I think so. I mean, I think it's in a way, I think it's almost easier to think about things as an analogy to lifting too, because the grit part, it's easy to come here and easy to do it when it's easy, right? Like when you're getting stronger every day, and you're like, I look better and better every week. Although I've never met anybody who says that, but I'm sure someone out there thinks
when
that.
you first start your lifting career, right? You see these impossible gains.
Yeah, like, this is incredible. Like, oh my god, every 2 weeks. What they say? Like the professor says, it's like this is your second day of lifting is like the first and last time you like your body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were naming this episode, you had said grit, and I was like, yeah, I really like it. And I think you asked me if should there be like a tagline to it or something. And I was like, yeah, there should be something. And I thought for a while, and I was, my brain was like,
we went back and forth.
and then I was like, oh, Alone.Together.
I'm pulling this out though because you did have a lot of good ones.
No, you can read them off.
But Alone.Together really stuck out to me as well because we're also going to talk about what lifting does for us. Hi, Cheyenne just tapped on the door.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And there is, even like bodybuilding is a little bit, well, not a little bit, I would say less communal than powerlifting is, certainly, just because of the way, because of what's, easier to do in powerlifting, and it's more advantageous to train with a crew. And yeah, that's true in bodybuilding too, but you don't need to because you're not doing the same type of thing. It's always good to have a spot, but if your rep ranges are 10 to 15, you're not really always going to oh my God, if I miss this. Right.
No, absolutely not. However, I feel like if you
push each other
want
more
to see results even in the bodybuilding, right, you have to go heavier.
Oh, yeah, no. Especially, well, we'll talk about the natty versus pharmacologically enhanced another time. But no, it really does make a big difference. And for me, I can feel a significant difference between when I'm training by myself versus training with somebody else.
Okay.
And it's not that I don't work hard when I'm training by myself. I do. But sometimes that other person, just by virtue of being there, will hold you more accountable, make you push a little harder, especially towards the end of those longer sets. And for me, it's a big and I absolutely love the community of it. But the Alone.Together part for me was, it really does feel like that, because there are aspects of this, which is the healthiest way for me to look at it, and not that I've been able to achieve this, but what I feel like one day the goal would be is that it's you versus you.
Yes.
And so there's the quote unquote alone part there, but we're all on the same path. So there's a community there supporting each other through sort of individual achievement, individual growth. And so that, to me, is why I thought that tagline went along really well with it. Because I felt like, that describes it a little bit more.
Well, so these are some of the things that you had thrown out. You're a single step, right?
Yeah.
And then you said grit, self-improvement, self-destruction, and to learn who you are. And then you said, or better yet, a single step grit, self-improvement, self-destruction, and self-awareness.
Yeah.
And then you said grit, the first step on a lifetime journey of development and understanding, which I also really like. I think that, look at how far any individual lifter has come from the start of their career to now.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's very true.
So starting
Yeah, but let's start with you this time because I went first last time.
So I never really was into sports. Um, I mean, I kind of dabbled here and there. I was into swimming. I did cheerleading.
Were you?
Yeah.
I didn't know you were a swimmer.
Loved it. Well, now I'm a singer, so that wouldn't happen. But
Well, I mean,
I did cheerleading, which I'm gonna argue is not a sport.
I don't know. That seems unbelievably athletic. I mean, okay, I don't know how it isn't a sport. I mean, you're competing for points. It's team. Like,
well, and you have. I mean, even depending, you're a flyer base.
yeah, you're doing crazy stuff.
100%. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not a sport. I'm just saying how.
Well, listen. I mean, there are a lot of people who label things the way they do for thousands of reasons. Although I think 998 of those reasons are insecurity.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's not a sport. Okay, does it make it any less impressive? Like, what the fuck? All right.
To me, I was never really in that like in my younger years, like in a team.
Yeah.
I first got into some type of training. It was cardio based. Just because I think that's where it's easiest to fall.
I mean, the barrier to entry is lower.
I then did like P90X videos.
Yeah.
When I was in college.
Yeah, for sure.
Career. So I do that in like my apartment.
Those are intense.
They actually
I don't
really
care
are.
what anybody says. Those things are not easy.
And then it was P90X and Jillian Michaels.
Yep.
She was like my first.
She was, I think, one of the big titans, really, of sort of that. I mean, there were others. Don't get me wrong, but she was one of the first. Because what years are we talking about, generally?
Probably like 2008.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And honestly, I feel like not that she was like the first like big female, but I think.
But she was one of them.
She was one of them. So I did P90X, Jillian Michaels, more so still cardio in my collegiate career.
Yeah.
And then I graduated college in 2012.
We have got to show. Well, you did show some of those pictures on that's still.
Well, we're gonna put those into like real.
No way.
So after that, Dana Lynn Bailey came onto my radar.
The queen herself.
Yeah, no.
I mean, she is. Like, she's unbelievable.
So I went down to like her warehouse camp, met her.
Dude, that is so cool.
But Nick Cadiz was a trainer down at Best Fitness, and he really, like, shout out to him. He really got like me into the lifting game. So I started training weights.
Yeah.
And then from there, just like between him and Dana Lynn Bailey, like watching her videos, I just fell in love. It was like you see changes in your body, like we were just talking about, and then like it gives you this sense of confidence.
Yeah.
And to me, it gave me a sense of something I can control.
Yeah, I was going to say, that is a big part of it. Under the surface.
Yes.
Perhaps really under the surface, but we'll come back to that.
So it gave me a sense of control, and I also grew up in a household where like fitness wasn't a big thing. So like my mom played softball and field hockey, but like my dad was but like not a healthy individual. So like my drive really was like I never want to be like that. Like I never want to get into a spot where like I am an older version and it's stuck in a younger version's body.
Right. I wouldn't want your body to limit what you would be trying to do. No, that's a really, in a lot of ways, I would say you're either right on it or ahead of your time with that mentality, because what am I, 10 years older than you ish?
Yeah.
Close enough, right? So there were more, like when I would go to the gyms in college, there were people in the gyms. Like there was there. But now, even today.
Yeah, but females.
Now we're living in that.
Yeah.
The golden age. 10 years ago, there were definitely. But I would actually. I'll ask you. So when you were going to the gym in college, what was the the how many men versus women?
Oh, the weight room was all like pretty much all males. It was like maybe 20 males to like one female.
Really? Because this is, I mean, our gym at LFOD, it's got to, there are times when it's far more women than men. So I would say on average 50-50 maybe.
Honestly, though, I feel like the female movement now is like, it's huge. Resistance training for females has become like such a prominent.
Well, and thank God too, because it's so beneficial for long-term health, long-term, not only mobility, but long-term ability, just to be and do things. The bone density benefits alone are just that alone are worth it.
Now, when did you start in college or did you start in high school?
I started in high school. So, did we talk? I can't remember. We talked a little bit about Taekwondo, right? On the last episode of the episodes that'll be like, in the vault for when we have millions of fans. Okay, so I started Taekwondo. I never really played a lot of sports either. But I was also a fat kid. So, and that was an official designation back then. Like now that more of like, I guess people would call it less inclusive language. But back then, first of all,
increased body mass index.
Yeah, I was a person of girth. A person of girth. And
I never was. I was the total opposite.
Yeah.
Well, I still.
Well, okay. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure thing.
We won't digress.
You can, you can see her on through your sweatshirt, but sure thing. Okay. So, but anyway, so I was from the time when Husky was a size. Husky was a size. It wasn't like a euphemism or like a label. It was also, but there was like small, medium, large, Husky. So I would wear a lot of Husky clothes. And I remember I liked soccer a little bit. I was playing fullback, of course. Like they're not gonna, but I liked that. That was fun. I didn't play a lot. I wanted to get into it, I guess, but it just sort of never really happened. I played baseball for like a minute, and I was terrible at it, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. I quit. I stopped going in the middle of the season because I was like, I dislike every aspect of this. I hated it, so I was like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. Here's why I think I didn't get into sports, because when I was in high school or going into high school, I really wanted to play football. And my mom was like, you're not playing because you're going to get hurt. And in a way, I was very annoyed back then. Now, you never know. Maybe it would have been fine. Maybe I would have, who knows? Like you never know. I do like the not having as many concussions, because back then it was, oh, you got your bell wrong.
Yeah.
There was no, hey, let's check. It's like, oh, can you see anything? Great, get back out there.
Exactly.
There was no like, wow, let's run a protocol and blah blah blah. No. It was, don't go to sleep. And nobody, I didn't even know why until like 5 or 10 years, 15 years later. It's like, oh, because you don't choke on your own vomit.
Yeah.
Like, don't go to sleep. I thought, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep. So yeah, there was that. So I was annoyed, and so I don't know where this guy literally out, because back then, like in high school, the internet was near as makes no difference in its infancy, essentially, right? Like we're talking about dial-up modems, at least middle school. Middle school definitely dial-up. I mean, we're talking about people had conversations about baud rate in school. There's not a single person listening to this, I don't care how nerdy they are, that knows what a baud rate is. I don't even remember what it was, and it used to be a subject of hour-long conversation from back then. So all dial-up internet, but
I think magazines were the biggest.
Magazines, yes. Thank you for keeping me on track. This is important. Magazines were it, and magazines, I know that I'm going to make this sort of like tautological statement here, but like you only know what you know, but your friends don't know that much more either, because unless someone's shown it to you, there's no like, oh, this was in my feed. No. It was like Walgreens or whatever had this magazine.
Still photo.
Right. Learn this technique by this perfectly manicured, I guess it was pre-general Photoshop, but perfectly manicured photo of
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger or this genetic freak who's also on gear.
Yeah.
And then you'll look like this. And I, of course, was like, well, if I do this, I'll look like Jay Cutler. And it's like, I did all those exercises, and I did, and it's like, okay, I definitely changed. But one, I was like, I never squatted, I never deadlifted, because I was like, I don't want to hurt myself. I want to do it the right way, and I didn't have a squat rack.
Ignorance back then, though, is bliss, though, because I will say, when I really believed that Dana Lynn Bailey got jacked off Jasmine Rice, but it gives you this sense of,
yes,
like,
I can do it.
This.
Well,
it's like a placebo effect.
Yes, and I will say that, like, you do see changes in your body, and I was like, well, okay, like, I'm not shredded like that, but I can start to see some changes, and you do see them, and it is exciting. And actually, the gear thing doesn't even matter, but what's like you don't realize, and they talk about it. It's in the magazines, but it's like, even when I read them, I'm like, the diet, whatever.
Yeah.
Because I'm just going to eat. And in college, I'm actually surprised I don't have any kind of. I don't think I was eating a ton of sugar, but I was
like underlying diabetes.
Yeah, almost like diabetes. Like almost, I was eating unbelievable amount. I think I was probably 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. I think, but that was also I was lifting every day, multiple hours a day, probably. I'm sure I was overtraining, but you have the testosterone level of a 20-year-old, and you're eating like a maniac because you just go to the college and swipe your card and you're like, oh, food is all of it. Eat all of it, and then you'd sleep a lot. So that's like the ideal. That's the ideal scenario.
Lost 15 pounds in college. I actually got mercury poisoning because I was eating so much tuna.
Holy shit!
But it was cheap.
Well, it was cheap. It is. Well, nothing.
I was just eating tuna with pickle juice.
You must have been fucking diced, or malnourished. You're just like.
I was completely malnourished. I was like maybe.
I was gonna say you look like one of those kids, like a UNICEF, like donate 5 cents a day to Brittany's diet.
But I think so. You were doing 5,000, 6,000.
It had to be because I wasn't exactly. I was just eating. It wasn't like, oh, I'll have rice and broccoli. I was like, no, I'll have these fucking chicken wings and I'll have fucking clam chowder. And not that any individual foods is problematic, but it's like when you eat a lot of them all the time. So did I get bigger? Sure. But I also, no one was going to confuse me for, a fitness athlete back then either. But I really, really liked it. And I wanted to ask you about this because the thing I liked about it the most was how it feels during it and after. There is something about that soreness. It is euphoric.
Feeling. It's like pain, but such a good pain.
Yeah.
It sounds like so, like it sounds like it shouldn't be, but it's like
no, yeah, it really is.
Honestly, when I push myself to the limit, and I don't do it all the time, but when I do, it's like you just have this like feeling of like pleasure like no other.
No, it's true. I mean, I think maybe in its simplest sense, it's still tension and release. Because you push, especially doing drop sets.
Yeah.
Right? You push until you can't go anymore, and then you lower the weight and you keep pushing until like literally it's basically empty and you can barely move. And it hurts a lot, especially for legs. But after that release of it's over or whatever it is.
Or like and
I've accomplished something. Yeah. And I did something. I did something that I didn't want to do and or thought I could do. There is something really powerful about that. It really does. And then the soreness is like getting that high again because it reminds you of how hard you worked.
Yeah.
Which is really good. Now, you mentioned feelings of control.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that because I have a lot of those too, and I'm wondering if you think about those things in the same way. So when you talk, like what do you think about and consider when you talk about weightlifting and control?
If I was so I did think a lot about this, and it's like it's the one thing that I can consistently show up for and I can control it.
Yeah.
So like I control the narrative I control what happens. And you know, obviously, with anything, some days are better than others, right?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
mindset is a huge thing. But I think also being able to like control my body and like, hey, I can change this. I can make this happen. You know, I can do this many sets. I can do this many reps. I can do this weight or not. It's like really the only thing in life that I feel like I can 100% control. And you could argue there's variability to that because, like, did you sleep well the night before? If you didn't, but like, you can
Right,
still
even that.
come in, you can still show up at to some capacity and control what you do.
Yeah, it's one of the only things that is somewhat predictable.
Correct.
You're like, okay, well, if I didn't sleep and I didn't this, you're like, well, maybe if I call upon the power of the old gods, I'll be able to get through this. But maybe if it doesn't, it's like, I'll be disappointed, but I really shouldn't, you know?
Yeah.
Or it's like, hey, I've fucking done all this shit. I should be ready to go, and I do it. And then sometimes you're like, this is awesome. And then it's like, why isn't this... What the fuck? I did everything I was supposed to do. And you're like, well, body's like, yeah, well, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
How do you think? How does the control aspect come in for you?
So, I think similarly, but you know, it's funny because what I thought about, because I thought about this, I think, for a long time ago, and to consider it now, I think it's still similar. And of course, you know, coming from someone who has gone through, well, still has OCD. I'm going to have OCD for the rest of my life, but has gone through the nightmare of having it melt down, and then gone through the treatment for it, and then, you know, and then later on discovering ADHD too, which is a big deal. But, you know, as you said earlier, we are in a sea of uncertainty. There is, certainty is an emotion, right? There's no such thing as statistical certainty with anything. Now, or I should say absolute certainty. Statistical certainty, and if you want to use it in the sense like, well, 99%, it's probably, you know, for sure. We use that linguistically in our language all the time. We understand. It's like, oh, it's definitely going to happen. Or this definitely won't happen. But, you know, OCD turbocharges how much humans hate uncertainty to begin with. And I think in a very similar way, I felt like this is something that I have some control over. And I also think, in terms of like existential angst, it's like, oh, if I get stronger, I'll be able to control the world around me a little bit more. Which, of course, you know, okay, it's true, but it's like, by what percentage? Like point and then about 100 zeros and then 1. Because you're like, the single greatest powerlifter to ever live would lose to a Home Depot pallet jack. So it's like, you know, on the one hand, what are we fucking doing here? But on the other hand, it's like, I really like it, and I'm okay with that. I'm getting the feeling that I'm a little bit in more control of the world. I sort of tell myself, well, and again, these aren't conscious. Like, I have to really consider, like, why do these things matter outside of the pleasurable feelings, outside of all those things? But I do think that there is this sense of being in the world, and, you know, it's basically just chaos. We see patterns, and sometimes, you know, there are patterns, but ultimately, you know, the randomness is, or what appears to us to be random is still present. But I feel like, oh, I do have a little bit more control.
We can control the narrative.
We can, yeah. Well, the narrative, 100%. I think the narrative for sure. And I was like, I never had, and this is like, we talk about this later on, but I never had a lot of confidence as a kid.
Same.
I have a lot of confidence now. And I got bullied a little bit, I would say. I mean, I feel like everyone got bullied then. Not everybody, maybe, but a lot. And certainly there was an aspect of that which I think why I liked bodybuilding, because it made me feel more in control. But I don't remember consciously thinking I want to bully somebody back. That really wasn't part of it. But I do remember describing to a therapist I went to once, and I'm not just them, I feel like I've talked about this other people. And when I've described, like, when you look at somebody who's like just super, super jacked, right? there's so many different ways to describe it, but the language that I used to use to describe it more often was like, that person's got slabs of muscle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to understand in context the word slabs. I mean, but usually it's like a building material, like, you know, a slab of slate or slab of rock or slab of armor or something like that. And for me, like when I think about how those words would be used in my head, it's like, oh, well, those are protective. Those are protective words, like, you know, a slab of armor. I mean, what is that? It's protection against the world.
What's a foundation? It's a slab, right?
Right, exactly. So it's some certainty, it's some structure in a sea, or in this wash of randomness and potentially pain, and this armor that can protect you from the world and all that. So I don't think about it like that anymore. But so I do believe there was a part of my life where at least part of it was, I'm building up some protection against that.
Oh yeah.
You know.
I mean, I think it gave me a sense of confidence that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And even on my worst day, I know I can come to the gym and like get lost.
Yeah.
So I think to some people, you know, some people could be drugs, some people could be drinking. Like mine's the gym.
Yeah.
And I think equally, it can be a fantastic outlet, and it can be a detriment.
Sure. I mean, any I want to call it coping mechanism, any behavior. I mean, there are some that I would say are more inherently destructive than others, but the reasons for engaging in them are generally,
yes,
especially if it's being used as a coping mechanism, it's going to be.
But if you asked me, like, what would your life look like if you didn't have fitness or the gym, I would know how to answer you.
So, yeah, let me ask you about that, because, you know, you and I have experienced, like anybody who does this, a series of injuries, some minor, some more than minor.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've both texted each other after the major ones. And I think we've both said the same thing, which was like, I just want to cry.
Yes.
And for me, and I've talked to others about this. I mean, I think, you know, I've talked to Anthony about it. You know, obviously he's undergone some significant, yes, right? And I simultaneously understand that this isn't the way it should be, quote unquote, but I also understand that there's a lot of it the way that it is. You know, whether it was when I was in music school, if I'm not good, what am I? If I'm not a good saxophone player, then what is Chris? If I'm not strong, then what am I? Right? And I've only had very brief moments of feeling strong, but it's like, but at least I'm pursuing it.
Right.
And so there's definitely, you know, I always make this joke when I'm at any powerlifting meet, or if I'm talking to somebody before their first powerlifting meet, because boy, is it fucking easy to look at like somebody else and be like, I'm going to solve all your problems. And it's like, well, physician, heal thyself, right? But it's like, it doesn't work the other way around necessarily. But I'd be like, hey, before you get out there, remember to tie your entire self-worth to how these 9 lifts go, right? And of course it's comical, of course it's absurd.
But you do.
And of course, yeah, that's like so I recognize that there's a lot of, I would say, unhealthy things, but it's not the fault of the exercise. It's because I still have a lot of development and a lot of internal work to do so that I can, you know, continue to enjoy the things that I enjoy, but also feel more fulfilled generally, have more self-worth generally, and, you know, and self-esteem. To enjoy those things so that when they go away, I don't feel like I'm stripped of an identity. Now,
I still think I tied my self-worth to it, though. And you know what? I didn't realize it, and this will be for another episode, but I didn't realize it until after I had Sophie.
Yeah. Well, because that changes everything.
It changes everything, and obviously that postpartum, like, small, like, period, like, you're supposed to be, like, rehabbing your body properly. Of course, if you don't have issues down the line. But it, like, I didn't realize how much of myself, like, really, like I had an idea, but like not
Yeah.
because like I was so limited that you then question you're like,
Yeah.
because like of course I'm a mom,
Right.
but like to me, like I was not like I'm not here to be like I'm here to be Sophie's mom, but I'm not here
But-
to just be
Right. Not in
Sophie's mom.
totality.
So,
Right.
but I also need to realize that like I'm not here just to be strong. But I
But right. But that's that might be a trick in my mind. I think I've been trying to. No, I really agree, and it's hard because I think it's easy to fall into that, at least for mine, and I think your brain type too, where it's like whatever it is that you are the most passionate about, you're obviously going to be drawn to, and there's going to be a hyper focus, and there's going to be, all the positives and negatives that come out of that are going to be magnified versus, let's say a control model, right? Where someone is like, they have, what I must admit is, well, I shouldn't say must admit. When I would think that it's another approach to life. We just put it that way, right? It's like, every time I drive by Planet Fitness, I'm like, those motherfuckers, I think, really got it together, right? Because they just come in, they like work out, move their bodies, and then they go home, and they call it a day. And I'm like, what it must be like to just fucking flow through life feeling great about yourself. I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine.
But I think that's where, when you said Alone Together, that clicked with me because I was like, even when I felt so alone after having Sophie, I was like, number one, there are so many people who feel like I feel, not even just after having a baby, after having an injury or, like doing not like they didn't do as great as they wanted to at a powerlifting meet. And then like you start having quite literally an existential crisis.
Oh, no, yeah, 100%.
Like, oh, what am I even doing?
What? Absolutely.
So, and like I've talked to other moms who feel similar. They're just like, like your body's different. But like even before I had Sophie, like if I went to a powerlifting meet and I like had it in my head, like I'm gonna lift this, and then I didn't, I was like, what the fuck am I even doing?
Right.
Why do I even show up?
Why do I show? Right.
But we keep coming back.
Well, that is like the moth to the flame, right? Like I simultaneously need it, and it kills me. Yeah. Yeah, that's really true.
But honestly, this could mold into a totally different podcast, but like I have a really hard time understanding addiction. I do. Because to me, like some people are like addiction's a disease. To me, like I've always been like it's a choice. People can choose to do that. But like I one day asked myself, I was like, okay, Brittany, if someone told you you can never go to the gym again, although the gym is a healthy addiction.
Right. I'm not addicted. I can stop whenever I want.
But if someone told me you can never set foot or like touch fitness equipment again, I wouldn't be able to do it.
No, it would be very, very good. Yeah.
Like I honestly,
like, well, I guess I'm gonna run around and hang off trees. I guess like I can jump around and do calisthenics or something.
But I honestly think like I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't. I mean, even after any injury, after I dislocated my motherfucking shoulder, though I tried to do a pull-up.
Well, that's because
like the very next. Because when I can't do something, I want to do it.
Well, when I crushed the nerve at C6, do you think that I was like, I called you, I think that day, well, you were there.
Yeah.
You were there when it happened, and I think I was like, the next day, I'm like, well, if the chiropractor can pop it back into place, I'm going to do the meet 3 days from now because I haven't lost any strength. And then, he popped it back into place, and it just wasn't there. And I'm like, and because the irony is, now, look, the real answer is I crushed it because I was not mobile enough to handle the situation, to handle the position that I put myself in. Fuck, yeah, 100%. And because I didn't, 100% self-induced, and I didn't do mobility before that for years and blah, blah, blah. Which is why I have to do it now. But the irony was, like, what was the what was the straw that broke the camel's back? It was squatting, which I didn't even give a fuck about. I had the best squat of my life, and then couldn't do the thing that I was the most excited about. It was like, I was gonna like, that was gonna be.
It was your big bench.
That was gonna be my, if everything went well, the biggest bench I'd ever had, and like, you know, and then.
And you had the biggest squat you ever had.
Then I had the biggest squat I ever had, and actually the biggest deadlift by, I'm sure doing it wrong, but whatever, I did it, it came up. So it's like, well, Chris, how'd the meet go? I'm like, fucking horrible.
Because we always focus on the thing that went wrong.
Well, didn't you get like a fucking 50 to 150 pound PR your squat? I'm like, yeah, but I don't give a shit about that. What about your deadlift? I don't fucking care. The thing that I was the bench. Like, that's the thing that I really, really wanted to do. And even this meet, Anthony's like, well, if you wanted to, you could come in and get a squat PR and a deadlift, maybe PR. And I'm like, yeah, for sure. On the one hand, I could have done it and gotten some kind of a token bench. That 100%. But two reasons for me. One, the bench is the one that I really care about. And secondly, also, considering that meet sells out, and I'm not kidding, that meet sells out in 2 minutes usually.
Yeah.
So, for me, I'm like, I always felt like it would be disrespectful to not go full bore.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, hey man, let me do it. But it was really, really enjoyable to do the emceeing thing, and I got to watch other people achieve, and that was really cool. And I do, obviously, I love talking. Obviously. I don't say. I do say, and I said for 6.5 hours yesterday, because the meet started at 9:20 and we finished at like around, call it 4-ish. Just call it. But it was great.
If you were to ask everybody in here the one person they know, your name is going to come up every time.
Well, I think that's cool. I also think it's probably good in a way, because I want people to feel like there is a community here. Yeah.
Well, there is. And again, it ties back to Alone.Together. Like, even the times where you feel lowest and you're like, I'm alone, I'm like, whatever, I'm depressed, I'm in my feels today. You come to the gym, and there is probably 10 other people who feel that very same way in the gym, and you're together.
I think actually that was what I was going to say. Well, what I was trying to go to. Yeah, that.
You mean with the power?
Yeah, that being like, you recognize what that feeling is, and you can, kind of help each other through it. And what you had said earlier about, I can stop, I couldn't stop if I wanted to, like all that thing. I think there's that shared passion too, which is a great thing.
Shared passion.
Well, I was going to say, because the other side of that coin is, it's like, if you, compare it to alcoholism if you want, whatever you want to compare it to, right? You have your sort of drinking buddies. It's like, well, here, you've got your body dysmorphia buddies, right? And you're like, I can just be a little stronger, I can just be a little this, and it feels so good in the moment. But, there is, and I don't want to, again, it's a small aspect. Maybe a little bit more, but I don't want to like dump on the whole thing, obviously, because I love it. But there can be a compulsive aspect to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And it's like, there is. So, and that's not great either, because, well, first of all, compulsions at best, are a momentary fix. But the problem is they're never only a momentary fix. They sort of slowly but surely raise your resistance to the result of the compulsion. So then the compulsion has to get bigger and bigger and bigger to compensate for this. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but after a while, you're like, hey, this thing that I was doing doesn't make this other feeling stop. So now I have to do way more of it to get a little bit, you're chasing the dragon. And that's very much OCD, part of that compulsion, right? The safe behavior doesn't work anymore. So now I have to do a more elaborate ritual or a longer ritual.
Why are we all here?
Right. We are. Yeah, dude, there's a lot to it. Like Tim Price, God rest his soul, would say, we're all here because we're not all there.
It's perfect.
It is.
I mean, it really is. I, honest to God, when I had Sophie, which is almost 2.5 years ago now.
That is.
I had a hard time doing banded pull-ups after having her. And I told myself, I will be happy once I get a pull up with a plate again. Now I'm at 2 pull ups with a plate and I'm still not happy.
Right. Well, that we've talked about this, like, scheduling happiness the way that you put a dental appointment down. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go see Curtis on this day, and then on Friday I'm scheduled to be happy because this thing's gonna happen. Yeah. It's like, well,
I hate to break it to you.
It doesn't really work like that. Way.
But honestly, I think if it did work that way, we would stop coming.
Yeah.
We wouldn't.
We would have achieved what our right. It's like, okay, I'm done now.
Yeah.
I can move on to something else.
I can move on to something else.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that it brings a lot of people together. I think it makes you feel. I think it gives people a sense of control.
Yes.
Oh, which, no, in a absolutely. World of chaos, I do think is a great thing.
Human beings have to find that control somewhere, and there are, healthier ways to achieve it and unhealthy. Look, again, I mean, I always use COVID as an example for contamination OCD for people because it's the easiest one for them to understand. Everyone experienced it, or most people experience it to a degree where it's like, there's no, you might not know that you have it. You can't see it. You can't smell it, whatever, right? And that's true for many, many viruses, but that's the more popular, I'm saying popular, but it was a cultural moment, right? So everyone knew. And it's like, you if you're worried about it, it's like, well, you're worried about the uncertainty surrounding, right? So generally, so it's like, that uncertainty. So what do people do? Whenever the more uncertainty there is, the more angst there is. And this is what I would talk to people about, both in OCD support group, but also explaining to other people what it's like as much as you can to try to have a small window of what it's like to have OCD like that. It's like, again, so where's there the most angst? Well, wherever there's the most angst is going to be the most uncertainty. So how do you try to compensate for a feeling of insecurity? You try to have a feeling of control or predictability. For some people, that shows up in, if you were a dog, you'd call it fear aggression.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I'm going to yell and scream at everybody because me yelling and screaming feels like control. Okay. I mean, it's not okay, but that is a strategy that many people adopt because maybe that's what they learned when they were a kid or whatever, where it's like, okay, well, if this loudness happens, then this other thing happens, and that's sort of okay, so I'll just connect to that. So maybe it happens there. Some people are like, I won't engage with the world at all because if I can't touch the world, then it can't hurt me. That's one way too. Obviously, there's like, okay, I can build my body a certain way here. I can eat this and this, and varying degrees of efficacy with those. But ultimately, it's doing a lot of the same things in your head, which is like trying to sate the feeling of how uncertainty feels bad usually.
Yeah.
And then the more severe or the more triggering the potential outcome would be, the worse that uncertainty is going to get over and over and over again. And I think you saw a lot of that. And I also tell people, like, where's there the most uncertainty? What happens after you die? Where's the most violence? Arguments about what happens after you die.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's not even nothing close to that one. You're talking about trillions in the body count. Well, do you mean in terms of like is trying to control?
Well, yes.
Yeah. True. Yeah, but that actually is less uncertainty existentially and more like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Because the uncertainty is gone. I should know that this is going to happen every 6 months with the same fight every 6 months. What is wrong with me? Why am I surprised by this? That's the uncertainty. Your stupidity is the constant. And my stupidity of still being here is also a constant. Oh fuck, we gotta pick up the kids. But we gotta shut up because we're 5 minutes away from my parents' house and we gotta go to the party.
But I mean, honestly, bringing it back to lifting, I also think from a female perspective, growing up, I think it was like Mean Girls, right? Like you had the movie Mean Girls. I think it happens still, right?
Oh, it
girls
definitely
are like inherently mean to each other.
It is a wild thing.
But I don't know. Does it stem from insecurity? Does it stem from jealousy? But you come into a gym, and it probably still happens, right?
Yeah.
But I think to a much lesser extent because you are cheering somebody else on. and you're like, that bitch just pulled 400 pounds. I'm gonna do that. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It makes you chase something while simultaneously like cheering on your like another female individual, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
It's a really good
lifting
point.
people up.
Yes.
And so to me, I don't think you can get that anywhere else because like of course we're all friends here, right?
Yeah.
And like, but I think truly it's special to see females like lifting other females up.
Yeah, I would. You know, it's funny. I
Same with men, you know, like instead of tearing each other down, you guys are like actively cheering somebody else on.
yes, but from what I've heard, a lot of women say, and you know, it can never be in anybody. You know, you don't know. You try to make an assumption, but it doesn't seem like it's the same thing because the guys will tear each other down, but in different ways. Sometimes it'll be passive aggressive, right? But usually it's more either like head to head or there's just no communication. Like we're going to sever this. So definitely guys get on each other. And look, there's always going to be pettiness and that for sure. But I don't know that it's to the same degree, or at least not the same modality, or the same. It just doesn't seem that way. I had never heard of this thing. Well, I don't know if it's always called the black eye. Maybe it's like the stink face. So have you heard of this where, let's say you're walking, well, yeah, you've been with Andy for 1,000 years. So let's say that you're walking with Andy and you walk by another woman and he's not paying attention, right? Or he is, but whatever, like you walk by. And have you ever experienced or heard someone experience like the women look at each other and then the woman who isn't with that person is like looking, like judging you, like eyeball to eyeball, like I'll fuck you. Like how the fuck, you know, that kind of thing? I don't know, because my friends have told me that, and I was like, does that happen? Because that is the opposite for guys. When guys almost be like, great job, man, like high five, right? Like,
oh, you're talking about their counterparts. Like you're walking, so if you see another guy and you're like looking at who he's with,
yeah,
you'll like high five him.
Yeah, at least with the eyes.
Versus women will like judge and be like,
yeah, now again, maybe this is nowhere near as widespread as I've been led to believe. But I have another friend from work or whatever who's like, oh yeah, this shit happens all the time, and I'm like, okay, I mean, I don't, what the fuck do I know? Okay, so that, you know what? Good. I'm glad that is not as widespread as that is, at least in her experience, that it had been. It's like, that's fucking wild. I know that is aggressive, but
I've seen other women who walk by and like you can tell they're totally like I've seen women who like totally judge me. And honest to God, I think without lifting, I would feel 100% and like I would feel very self-conscious about myself if I didn't have lifting. Like now another female like looks at me or like I feel like is judging me and I'm like, fucking bitch.
right.
If I didn't feel good about myself and I think have this kind of area where like I can, you know, change my body, I can do that, like I think I'd be like, what is she looking at? What does she think? Like, what is she thinking? Now I just like kind of don't give a shit.
Well, do you think that that's potentially also because you are much more self-actualized as a result of this? Because this is like a passion for you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it more too. Like, I have yet to ascend to your level of like, I'd be like, oh, they must be looking at something. Well, maybe they're right. My ass is too small.
No.
But I knew that anyway.
It will be like a wicked fleeting thought with me
Oh,
now. Like,
okay. That's great. That is great.
Yeah.
Well, and that is part of it. I think like that we can all at least feel some people obviously feel, a smaller connection with these things, but usually in this community or anything else, there's a really big connection of just the idea that we're all trying to hit something that is probably unattainable because it's always the next goal, whatever it is, like the next goal, the next one. And we know what it's like to struggle for that. Even the elite still have to beat their own numbers, you know. But I think everyone is still just trying
It's a
to
forever
be
game.
better. It is a forever game.
But I mean, it is like a lot of my why.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would not want to. I love doing this too much to not do it.
Yeah.
You know. No, don't get me wrong. It's healthy to take a break every once in a while too. Like maybe not for very long.
But do we though? Because mentally we're always here.
Well, I mean, like if okay, so there are some times where if I'm gonna go on vacation, which is rare, but if I do, I'm like, and I tell myself ahead of time, hey, we're just gonna go, and you're gonna be like 2, 3 days, sometimes maybe 5 of not lifting. And sometimes, you know, there's some activity usually,
Yeah.
like, you know, walking around or whatever, but like, and sometimes I feel like even though, well, I believe this with it, I better be doing something on vacation to distract me from how my body doesn't feel pumped, right? So if it's like a work trip and I'm like working on stuff and being, you know, or doing my job, that's a little bit different because it's like, okay, this is like an all day thing and we're going to go to dinner and the schmooze and all of this stuff. That's totally whatever, fine, right? But I also sometimes try to remember it's like, look, sometimes I can get away with how I train because I have to travel for work.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think like if I was not forced to take 2 to 3 days at a time, sometimes more, with minimal stuff, then I'd be injured way more often because sometimes like sometimes like I'll have a work trip coming up, so I know I'm purposely going to overtrain going into this thing because I know I've got a bonus,
which is
stupid. I know,
but I think that's where the Alone.Together came from, and I think it was a great tagline.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great place to end that episode. So thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And we got another one coming up hopefully next week.
Yep.
All right.
Peace out.
Bye.